I went to every Pokemon Center in Japan. Just in case you're not familiar, the Pokemon Center is a chain of stores where you can buy pretty much every type of Pokemon merchandise you can imagine, and a bunch more you never knew existed. In the West, they're pretty much exclusively an online retailer, but in Japan, they have 16 real-life stores located all across the country. And towards the end of last year, I decided to try and visit every single one. Why? Because of a dream. Like a lot of 90s kids, I grew up watching the Pokemon anime, playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards, Beyblades, and tons of Nintendo games, not really knowing where it all came from until I was a bit older. And that's about when I learned Japan was freaking far from where I was born, so it always kind of felt like an impossible dream that I'd ever get to see it in person. A few years later, I discovered YouTube, eventually created a channel of my own, and now over a decade later, that dream of visiting the birthplace of all my favorite things was finally possible. Taking a look through my content, you might say that having an obsession with Pokemon would be an understatement. So if I was gonna fly halfway across the world to Pokemon's motherland, you bet I was gonna make the most of it. Little did I know the journey would start as soon as we landed in Tokyo. Oh, I definitely want Clodsire or Tandemaus.
I want Tandemaus. If you get what
it's Tandemaus! We got Tandemaus! Oh my god, how do you open them? Now, any good Pokemon trainer should know that adventuring on your own can be a lonely and potentially dangerous road. Thankfully, I had my partner in life and loving wife Geten join me on this trip, and she actually lived in Japan for 3 years before, which helped a lot when it came to planning stuff. For the first couple weeks, we also had 2 other friends joining us on this journey, so here's the breakdown. As an American tourist, the maximum time you can stay in Japan is 3 months, so of course that's exactly how long we made our trip. The first 2 weeks would be a multi-city tour across the southern parts of Japan, stopping at 4 Pokemon centers along the way. We would then head back to Tokyo where we rented an apartment for the remaining 2.5 months, and from there we could plan our visits to all the rest of the Pokemon centers. Shinkansen. The journey to our first Pokemon Center was about a 5-hour ride from Tokyo on the Shinkansen, or bullet train, which in case you've never heard of are super fast trains that'll take you almost anywhere in Japan, reaching a maximum speed of 200 miles per hour, hence their name. But besides for their speed, bullet trains are just as well known for the bento boxes you can purchase at most stations, and I was pretty excited to try my first one. Almost 10 hours later, we arrived in Hiroshima. And as much as I immediately wanted to book it to the Pokemon Center, we didn't travel all the way here just for Pokemon. So after trying out Hiroshima's famous savory pancakes, we actually took a ferry to the nearby island of Miyajima, where I'd get to spend the night at my first ryokan, or traditional Japanese inn. It was really cool being immersed in all this Japanese culture so early in our trip, but what had me smitten the most was definitely the food.
Oh my god, that looks amazing.
The next morning, we head off to explore Miyajima's most famous site, the Itsukushima Shrine, or floating Torii Gate. It's not till you get really up close that you get a sense of how big this thing actually is. Wow. If you're interested in seeing more of the non-Pokemon stuff we did in Japan, be sure to check out our vlog channel Slice of Us, where we documented the entire journey in detail. But after the shrine, we took the ferry back to Hiroshima, where it was finally time to visit the first Pokemon Center. Being my first time ever visiting one of these stores, I spent nearly 2 hours exploring and gushing over every single little detail, so I felt like that experience deserved its own video. But I'll share some of the highlights here. So this is the Pokemon Center at Hiroshima, and as you can see, the mascot is a shiny Gyarados with Pikachu riding on top. I was hoping to buy at least one exclusive item from each center to sort of prove that I'd been to every single one, and I thought each center had an exclusive Pikachu plushie like dressed up to represent the city, but I couldn't find anything like that. So I didn't see too much exclusive merch inside the store, but here at the outside we have a Pokemon Center Hiroshima coin that you can get. Hoping that every Pokemon Center would have one of these, I decided to try and collect them all. Oh, it's so hot! It felt like we'd done so much already, but our journey was just getting started, and that very same day we took the bullet train to what eventually became my favorite city we visited during this trip, Osaka. There are two Pokemon centers in the city of Osaka, and they happen to be just 20 minutes away from each other by train. So I decided to visit both in the same day, but not before fueling up with another iconic Japanese dish. There seem to be two conflicting origin stories for this delicious omelet with rice, but this Osakan restaurant called Hokusei claims it was first served up right here in 1925. 100 years later, we still don't know exactly who invented it, but I must say, they definitely make the most delicious one. Thankfully, the Pokemon Center was close by, on the 9th floor of a massive indoor mall. And greeting us right as we got off the escalator were the legendary birds of Kanto. This is the Pokemon Center Osaka DX, which I later learned stands for Deluxe, and boy did it live up to that name. Not just in terms of size, but having far more unique items that I hadn't seen at the previous center. Now, you know I'm always trying to find the weirdest merch, and here we have... I actually don't know what the heck this is. Oh! This was for sure the weirdest Pokemon merch I'd seen up to that point, but definitely not the last. This is also where I learned that the popular Sitting Cuties line of plushies actually have a completely different name in Japan. Pokemon Fit. I've heard of Sitting Cuties. Is that what it's called in Japan? Pokemon Fit? Can't say I really get the name, so if any of you guys know, comment below. There was also this awesome holographic screen you could interact with and see Pokédex entries for different Pokemon. And just outside the center, there was even a Pokemon Cafe, which I didn't know you needed to make reservations for, so we didn't get to go. At least not here in Osaka, but more on that later. In the end, I bought this Psyduck plushie purely because of how derpy it looked, and of course we had to get a bag to store all of the stuff that we would eventually end up buying. Thankfully, they also had an exclusive coin here, which makes 2 so far and just 14 more to go. As I mentioned, there are actually 2 Pokemon centers in Osaka, but at this point we've been traveling non-stop for almost 5 days and my group was feeling pretty tired, so I had to brave the journey to this next one alone. I'm no stranger to walking around my home city by myself, but Japan was a whole nother story, especially when it came to the public transit. Fortunately, most of the signs were also in English, so I was able to make it just fine. Now, this is actually the very first Pokemon Center store to ever open in Japan back in 1998. Minor correction, this was actually the second store to ever open, just a few months after the first Tokyo location. But both of them have since relocated, which makes Osaka the oldest Pokemon Center to keep its original name since the Tokyo one rebranded. Ah, here we go. No way, it's Koraidon? No, there had to be something else here. This is the first store. I did a little research, and prior to Sword and Shield, the mascots for this center were Meowth and Pikachu alongside one of the starter Pokemon from whatever the latest generation was. The store itself is kind of crowded, so we're gonna do the intro with my boy Mario, because this Pokemon Center is actually right across from Nintendo Store Osaka. And oh my god, there is a lot to see here. One unique aspect of this store was a whole area dedicated to the Pokemon trading card game, which was admittedly pretty small and empty and just looked kinda sad, but I'm gonna assume on weekends or whenever a new expansion drops, it's more lively. They also had a different line of sleeping plushies that were extremely cute, some apparel items I hadn't seen yet like Gym Leader Grusha's scarf, and some very silly socks with the Pokemon's heads popping out. No. The machine is out of service? Are you kidding me? Well, there is another one, but it doesn't have a special Osaka coin. Oh my god. Okay, I gotta at least see what it was, right? Oh no, come on, that's so cute. F it, dude. I'm gonna get Mewtwo. So far, this was the most packed Pokemon Center I'd seen, likely because I came in the evening when people were out of school and work, so I didn't end up buying too much, but definitely made up for it at the Nintendo store right across the hall. There's a store just for One Piece. I mean, it makes sense. It's the highest selling manga ever. Chopper, what are you doing, bro? You're too rich. After the center, I met back up with the group and somehow still had the energy to go out and explore Dotonbori. I think my camera was dead at this point though, so I didn't get any footage. But the vibes and people here were so chill, and I got to eat takoyaki, which is my favorite Japanese snack, also apparently invented in Osaka. But after 2 centers in a row, even I needed a little break from Pokemon. So for the next few days, we explored some of the other well-known spots in the area, like the peaceful mountain town of Koyasan, where we got to spend the night at a monk temple before heading off to the city of Nara, most famous for its extremely friendly deer. And after that much-needed change of pace, we headed off to the old capital of Japan, Kyoto.
I absolutely love the mixture of old and modern in this city. There's like a lot of people walking around with kimonos, and a lot of the buildings kind of look older too, but then you have like right next to it a super modern skyscraper. So I wonder if the Pokemon Center will have a similar vibe, maybe tying new and old.
But before checking out the center, we decided to take a scenic walk through the Arashiyama bamboo forest, which was just as beautiful in person as the pictures I'd seen of it, and had a surprise hike that was quite intense but totally worth it because...
Do you see this? All for the monkeys.
I got to see my favorite animals.
I'm gonna feed the monkey a peanut. There you go. He's kind of an anxious one.
The view from up here was also absolutely breathtaking, so if you're ever in Kyoto, I would definitely recommend. And after saying goodbye to my new friends, it was finally time for the next Pokemon Center.
We're in Pokemon Center, Kyoto. Here we got Pikachu riding Ho-Oh. The Ho-Oh statue is signed by Masuda. And who else? I can't tell whose signature that is.
Almost immediately, I noticed a lot of representation from a specific Pokemon region, and that's because Johto is actually based on the real-life region of Kansai, which Kyoto is the capital of. So all over this Pokemon Center, you can spot the starter Pokemon from Johto and this absolutely adorable statue of Pikachu donning a kimono.
First time I've seen these.
Oh my gosh, you can't. These are for kids though.
Yeah,
Free
definitely
means,
would not.
Yeah, free means like free.
Oh, it's not free. It's
No,
the
no,
size
no, like
is
the size
free.
is free.
Okay.
There were a lot more unique items at this center, like these fluffy Hisuian Arcanine hair clips, a Bronzor beauty mirror, and tons of Pokemon earrings and accessories. But I think what took the cake for me were these Pikachu rain boots.
Alright, we got the Galar starter, Zamazenta, and the Kyoto Special, kimono wearing Pikachu. You already know which one we're getting.
As impressed as I was with the special selection here, I only ended up buying this bag of cookies as a snack for the long road still ahead. And this kid's book, mainly because I thought the art was really cute, but also because I was trying to learn some basic Japanese and figured it might help since it's meant for babies.
Now leaving Kyoto. I really like the vibe of this city and the people.
Before heading back to Tokyo, there was just one more little stop we had to make at perhaps the most famous site in Japan, Mount Fuji. This was hands down the most breathtaking part of our trip so far, with a beautiful view of Fujisan right from the private onsen in our room. We also did an air, land, and sea expedition around the mountainside town of Hakone, with my favorite part being this ropeway that totally reminded me of Mount Chimney in Hoenn. And again, you can see more of these incredible experiences on our vlog channel. But with our multi-city journey finally complete, we returned to Tokyo and bid farewell to our friends who had joined us up till now. Karen and I would of course remain in Tokyo for the next 2.5 months, which meant it was time to lock in, because there's not one, not two, or even three, but 4 Pokemon centers in Tokyo, and 2 more if you count the neighboring cities. And we of course planned on visiting every single one, starting with Shibuya.
Oh my god, this is the scramble. Holy. Today we're visiting Pokemon Center Shibuya. Here we have Mewtwo.
Not only was this one of my favorite looking Pokemon centers aesthetically, but it also stands out as the only one in the world to have a Pokemon design lab,
where you can essentially make your own Pokemon t-shirt.
Signing up was a little bit confusing without Japanese, but thankfully the machine itself had an English option and gives you 30 minutes to design your shirt, which was more than enough considering the process itself doesn't give as much freedom as you might expect.
They have 695.
Dude, wait, that's not all of them. Oh, there's no Hoenn. No Kalos, Alola, Galar. We got Hisui though. Dude, that's pretty cool. So they have silhouettes for all of these.
Despite being limited to just one Pokemon per shirt, you can still get a lot of variations out of each design, with one template even letting you add multiple stickers in whatever position you want. But no matter which template you go with, you can only choose one Pokemon for your shirt, so naturally I went with my favorite.
Is this how Disney adults feel finding hidden Mickeys? 'Cause it's pretty cool.
We then had to wait about 30 minutes for our shirts to be printed, so we decided to have a look around the store. And we actually came here on November 1st, literally one day after Halloween, but already the shelves were stockpiled with Christmas stuff. They literally wasted no time. And much like some of the previous Pokemon centers, this one was located on the same floor as a Nintendo store, another Shonen Jump store with the coolest Luffy statue I'd seen so far, and perhaps most uniquely, a Capcom store. And I'm an absolute sucker for Mega Man, so this was a very welcome surprise.
Oh, dude. Mega Man Battle Network? That was my jam.
After that little adventure, we walked back to the Pokemon Center and our shirts were ready.
And boom!
Wow.
Monferno. I went with my favorite Pokemon after all.
Sadly, this store didn't have a coin-making machine at all, but I did get a selfie with Mewtwo, which is arguably cooler. And with our first Pokemon Center in Tokyo down, we decided it was finally time to check out the biggest one in all of Japan next, the Pokemon Mega Center in Ikebukuro.
Dude, look at this Garbodor trash can. Only for combustibles. I mean, I'm pretty combustible.
Located inside the absolutely massive Sunshine City Mall, Ikebukuro's Mega Pokemon Center easily lives up to its name, with a vast display of Pokemon statues greeting you even before entering the store itself. I didn't exactly keep track, but it looked like almost every single starter Pokemon was here, along with an assortment of other random Pokemon, perhaps remnants they decided to bring here from older store displays. But the decor goes beyond just statues, as I spotted Pokeball-themed plants and lamps I definitely want for my future house. Then it was time for the main event, and the mascot for this Pokemon Center was none other than Miraidon. This was by far my favorite display up till now, because of how detailed and almost realistic it looked bursting through the wall. As for the inside of the store, I wasn't able to actually get that much footage, mainly because I felt like the employees there were hovering a lot. I did manage to sneak a clip of this really cool Pokemon camping set though, and some sleepwear items I hadn't seen before. But honestly, the outside areas almost outshine the center itself here, with a bunch more displays and murals to take pictures with, and even a little cafe called Pikachu Sweets that's totally different from the main Pokemon cafe you'll find at the DX centers. Finally, there's a whole separate store called Pokemon Go Labs that I somehow missed when I came here, but seems to have a lot of the same merch, just obviously more Pokemon Go themed. So if you want a picture with the sexiest Pokemon professor, don't miss it like I did.
They have the coin machine here, and there's a special Mega Tokyo Pikachu dressed up as Charizard. Oh. Okay, it's not that hot. We got Pikachu with the Charizard costume.
With those two down, we still had two more Pokemon centers to visit in Tokyo. And next up was the Pokemon Center DX.
Tonight we are in Nihonbashi to visit the Pokemon Cafe.
Hold up, did he just say cafe? I thought we were going to the Pokemon Center. Well, you might remember back at the Osaka DX Center, there was a Pokemon Cafe we didn't get to visit because they have a pretty strict reservation system. Luckily, I was able to book one here at the Tokyo location, and these are the only two Pokemon centers that have these cafes, by the way. So if you want to learn more about how to reserve or even what's inside, I made a full video on my experience at the Pokemon Cafe that I'll link in the description.
I feel so bad.
So after that delicious dinner with Pokemon pals, the Pokemon Center Tokyo DX was just across the hall. However, something seemed to be standing in our way.
He is large and in charge. Now we're gonna charge into the Pokemon Center.
I was surprised to find this center wasn't part of a giant mall like pretty much every other one so far had been, instead having its own dedicated entrance with large murals featuring the 3 types of starter Pokemon. Even more impressive though was the entry hall to the center itself, as it highlighted the entire history of the Pokemon video games from Gen 1 all the way to Alola. I know, they're 2 generations behind now, and I really hope they update it in the future because it's just so cool getting to see the evolution of the series in a physical display. Heck, they should just make an official Pokemon museum. I for one would instantly book a flight back to Japan. As for the store itself though, it was honestly a bit smaller than I expected for it being a DX center. It looks pretty big when you first walk in, but then you realize it's just an optical illusion caused by these floor-to-ceiling mirrors at the ends of each section. And the merch wasn't all that special, minus these very sussy plushies.
This might be the weirdest Pikachu plush I've ever seen. Why is he shaped like Among Us?
Besides for that Pikachu though, I didn't end up buying much since the Pokemon Cafe had its own exclusive merch, and I wanted as much unique stuff as possible, so I decided to save my yen for this awesome coffee cup.
Badge gift.
And that meant there was just one more Pokemon Center left in Tokyo. This whole time my wife kept saying she'd save the best one for last, and I didn't really get why, until I saw him.
Oh my god. No way.
I don't know what to say. It's Rayquaza. It's my favorite legendary. Like, I'm just in awe, looking at, like, marveling at this thing.
But before we get into the center itself, a little bit of context might help. Tokyo Skytree is currently the tallest structure in Japan, and 3rd tallest in the world. At the base of this gargantuan tower is a complex known as Skytree Town, which contains a ton of restaurants and shops, including the Skytree Town Pokemon Center. But finding it among this maze of stores was no easy task, as we kept getting distracted by the many interesting shops around here. My favorite though was by far the Nanoblock store, which if you don't know are kinda like Lego's micro-sized cousins, and they have an official Pokemon line with some pretty awesome looking models.
That looks really hard to put together.
Eventually, we were able to locate the Pokemon Center, and as you saw, I was immediately drawn to the massive Rayquaza bursting out of the ceiling. But then I noticed they had another statue of its Mega Evolution in its shiny form, which I think we can all agree is just the best shiny Pokemon. But the Hoenn fan service didn't stop there, as you could also spot the Hoenn starters throughout the store. And with Ruby Sapphire being the first Pokemon games I grew up with, this store nearly had me in tears.
This is insane.
Getting to all these statues was kinda rough though, since at least when I went, the store was super packed, and I don't know if their AC was broken, but it was really warm in there, which paired with the amount of people made for a pretty foul smell. But I did manage to snag these amazing limited edition ceramics themed around the Year of the Dragon, and this Gengar hair tie for my wife for doing such an amazing job planning this whole trip so far.
We got Rayquaza.
But as the saying goes, when in Skytree, you gotta go up. I don't think anyone actually says that, but if you're visiting this Pokemon Center, I would definitely recommend going up and seeing the view of Tokyo from up here, particularly in the evening or nighttime.
Whoa. Sugoi.
With Skytree done though, we had finally visited every Pokemon Center in Tokyo. Or had we? Because while technically part of an entirely different city, there is one more Pokemon Center with Tokyo in its name.
So we are in Chiba, which is another prefecture kind of close to Tokyo, about like a 30-minute train ride. This area is also known as Tokyo Bay, at least all the signs around that I'm looking at, but it's not Tokyo, which is weird.
This Pokemon Center is once again located in, you guessed it, an indoor mall called Lalaport. And it took us a while to actually find the center, but once we did, what happened?
Already the best Pokemon Center we've been to, because
Why is there so much Tandemaus and a Mousehold merch?
the washi tape, we'll get the stickers, we'll get this, where you get the mugs.
Baby, you can't buy every Mousehold thing.
Yes, we are. Oh,
You cannot buy you can't buy everything Mousehold. Stop.
This new merch line called Waka de Ika had dropped around the time, featuring Kitten's favorite Paldean Pokemon. I didn't really get the name until I did a little research and learned the Japanese names of Mousehold and Tandemaus. Then it all made sense.
She's dying right now. She's literally dying right now.
please.
Despite despite what you've seen so far, they didn't just have mouse propaganda at this store. They also had some of the cutest merch for the Paldean starters, cause these weren't just regular plushies, you can actually interact with them.
Oh my goodness! You can pet it on the head.
Quaxley fans stay losing though. There was also a surprising amount of Hisui merch here, like plushies, hand towels, and...
Oh my god, no way. They got the Sass Queen, and it's like bendy arms. Oh my god.
It's hard to describe exactly why, but this Pokemon Center had the chillest vibes of any store so far, which combined with the vast diversity of merch, made Tokyo Bay my favorite shopping experience at any Pokemon Center so far, and likely why I ended up buying a lot more than I expected.
24,655 yen, which is about $165, the most we've spent at any Pokemon Center so far.
With it ending up as one of my favorites, I was surprised to hear this Pokemon Center was actually being remodeled just a few weeks after I left Japan. Luckily, my friend Super Duper Danny got to go to the reopening, and it looks like they only made it better by committing to their nautical theme with a big lighthouse now in the center of the store, and a brand new mascot. Where previously it was just a generic starter trio, now you'll see Ampharos and Meryl all over the store, and it is just so cute. Like, honestly, I want to go back already.
Another point for the Tokyo Bay Pokemon Center, they actually have the metal. They literally have everything at this Pokemon Center.
If you're making the journey all the way to Tokyo Bay, I'd also recommend stopping by this other mall that ended up having my favorite store in all of Japan. But this particular one was no regular book off, and I found some crazy deals on retro Pokemon games here, which inspired me to try collecting all the Game Boy and GBA Pokemon games boxed in Japanese, and I documented that whole adventure in this video. Now, you'd think 5 Pokemon centers would be enough to satisfy the citizens of Tokyo, but Yokohama really said, nah, I'ma do my own thing. As an islander, I often find myself infatuated with any town or city with a good waterfront, and that's exactly what Yokohama's known for. Despite being just a little over an hour train ride away from Tokyo, it's considered an entirely separate city with its own unique identity and tons of stuff to do and see. So as soon as we arrived, we went for a stroll around the harbor, and somehow ended up at the Cup Noodle Museum, where you can learn the history of one of Japan's most famous brands, and even make your own custom instant ramen. We also got to try noodles from around the world at the Noodles Bazaar, and at the Korean stall I noticed quite a peculiar poster. It seemed like the Pokemon Center was already calling back to me. But we decided to end our day with another one of Japan's most famous franchises, and I don't think this video will ever do justice to just how surreal it was seeing this thing in person.
All motors are ready and good to
He's
go.
gonna crush us, I'm telling you.
Sadly, I found out this particular Gundam base was permanently closed a few months later, so I guess I should consider myself lucky to be one of the last few people to witness this giant robot's glory. The next day I had just one thing on my mind. On the way there, however, I was drawn in by a store on the previous floor called Surugaya, and if you saw my retro game hunting video, you'll know this store is just as good if not better than Book Off, so of course I decided to pop in.
I never even knew they made a Celebi Game Boy. What? Pokemon Center exclusive.
Anyway, one floor up from Surugaya was the Pokemon Center, and the statue here might just be the most unique, showing off Yokohama's maritime theme with Pikachu wearing a full sailor outfit and posing around a ship wheel, along with some starter Pokemon and the mythical Manaphy. But that's not all, cause this Pokemon Center had a second surprise mascot in Kyogre, just casually hanging out on the ceiling.
Why does Groudon's face look like that? He's terrified.
Weirdly enough, I think this was the first store I'd heard the actual Pokemon Center music from the games playing in the background.
Look at this absolute unit. He's huge.
And for some reason, hearing this tune put me in such a good mood that once again I ended up buying a lot more stuff than I'd intended.
Is this a Mareep for scrubbing your body? What? This might be the weirdest thing.
I'm glad I bought this extra stuff though, because around this time, they started handing out a bonus gift if you spent more than 6,000 yen. The only problem was the gift being a book, and I can't read Japanese. But at least the art looks pretty.
We're gonna get our coin now, which here in Yokohama, we got the Sailor Pikachu. Ta-da!
Having finally visited every Pokemon Center in the greater Tokyo area, for real this time, we decided to take a break from Pikachu and pals. At least in real life, because around this time, the second Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC was coming out, and ya boy had to get to work. So for the next couple of weeks, we stayed put in our Tokyo apartment while I grinded through the Indigo Disc. Pretty much right after came Christmas, which I figured would be quite different in Japan, but I wasn't expecting to be eating a bucket of KFC. I'm not joking, this is actually what a lot of Japanese people do on Christmas. Why? I couldn't tell ya, but it was surprisingly delicious and very different from what I'm used to, so cheers to new experiences. The next week absolutely flew by, and along came the new year, which meant we had just 2 more weeks left in Japan. 2 weeks to visit 6 more Pokemon centers. Did we really complete this odyssey on time? Was it even worth it in the end? Find out next time on... Just kidding. Here's the plan. First, we travel to Nagoya for just 1 night, then stay in Kanazawa also for 1 night, before returning to Tokyo to rest up for our long journey up north, making a quick stop in Sendai on the way to our final destination, the Sinnoh region. I mean, Hokkaido. The journey to Nagoya wasn't too bad, and we actually arrived so early that the Pokemon Center wasn't even open yet. It was also a bit gloomy, but that didn't stop us from enjoying a walk through Central Park, not to be confused with the one in New York. We were basically just killing time until the center opened, and when it finally did, the first thing I noticed...
Looks like it's a bit small, but you never know what you might find.
Turns out the old saying size doesn't matter rings true, cause they ended up having a pretty good selection of unique items, including a new line of accessories and apparel centered around the move Hyper Beam and the Pokemon that can learn it.
Doesn't seem like there's a special mascot here. We just have Pikachu with Score Bunny and Chikorita.
Ooh, we got a Masuda signature though.
As well as... I'm not sure who that is. It's pretty faded.
If any of you guys know, drop it in the comments, but despite its size, this center also featured a Pokemon trading card game area. And with the DLC having recently come out, they finally had some Terrapagos merch, which was admittedly pretty cute.
Got a special medal here too with Litten, which is weird because at the entrance they had Score Bunny and Chikorita, but I guess the medal has Litten.
I ended up buying this sick sling bag that I still wear from time to time, and we also got this super cute umbrella that came in quite handy when it started raining later that night. But once again, we weren't gonna let the weather stop us from exploring, as we decided to head up Nagoya's Tower, officially known as Mirai Tower, a name that might sound familiar to those of you that played Pokemon Violet. Perhaps due to the rain or the fact it was a Tuesday, it was pretty much empty up there, which made for a pretty romantic date we won't soon forget. The next day we actually had a bit of time before our train to Kanazawa, so we decided to check out Nagoya Castle. And I'm so glad we had the time to see it, cause as a kid I always wanted to be a ninja when I grew up, and this was as close as I'd probably ever get to living that fantasy. We maybe spent a little too much time here because I remember having to rush to our train, but thankfully we made it on time and set off to Kanazawa.
So it's very cold and rainy in Kanazawa, and we had a few things planned, but we changed our minds. We're doing it tomorrow. So for dinner, we came to get udon because it's cold and I want something warm.
It was in fact so cold that I ended up waking up with a cold. But it wasn't bad enough to stop us from going to the Pokemon Center, which was thankfully right next to the train station, so we could head back home right after.
Who's excited for another Pokemon Center?
As you can see, we were pretty tired, but that would quickly go away as soon as I saw the statue here.
I never would have expected Milotic to be one of the mascot Pokemon.
This was definitely the chillest Pokemon Center so far. and the employees were super nice. One of them even asked if I wanted a picture with Milotic and taught me its Japanese name, Mirokaros. There was also another kimono donning Pikachu statue here, totally different from the one in Kyoto. And they even had plushies of it. So finally I got a custom Pikachu plush. And I'm really happy it was one representative of Japan as a whole.
This might be the first time in history where Quaxley is the one almost sold out.
This center is also where I found the Knackly salt shaker that ended up going kind of viral on Twitter. And still one of the best Pokemon products I think they've ever made. They actually had a lot of cute, unique kitchen and bath stuff, like this little Oshawott plush you can apparently take into the tub with you. And of course, the usual products you'll find at pretty much every Pokemon Center.
Then we got the Kanazawa coin, and wow, that was quick. Another one.
Because of the weather and the long journey scheduled for the next day, we didn't get to explore too much of Kanazawa, but it's definitely a city I want to revisit purely for the vibes and how it beautifully blends the natural and modern sides of Japan.
Corbinite.
After a long rest back at our apartment, we were up bright and early to begin the longest leg of our entire trip so far, and on the fastest bullet train in all of Japan.
We just rode the fastest bullet train in Japan all the way to Sendai for the next Pokemon Center. You might also notice the cozy drip. It's because we're going somewhere very cold. Not yet, but soon. Ah yes, another Pokemon Center, another escalator.
While most Pokemon Centers are named after the city they're located in, this one goes by Tohoku, which is the name of the wider region around Sendai.
There's not like a bigger mascot, so I'm just gonna say he's the mascot of this Pokemon Center. But he's also joined by the usual suspects, Pikachu, and also Grookey, my boy Mojo from the Sword and Shield playthrough.
This was by far the tiniest Pokemon Center of them all. Like, you could literally walk from one side of the store to the other before I even finish this sentence. Okay, maybe it's not that small, but this is literally the only clip I got of it, and you can pretty much see the entire store here.
Got the Victini coin. Any second now. Oh, there's Rowlet in it too. That's cute.
We decided to keep our visit to Sendai quite short, rather than spending the whole day like we usually do. But honestly, I'm glad we did because I didn't realize just how long of a journey it would be to Hokkaido. As you can see, we didn't arrive in Sapporo until nighttime, but I can at least say the wait was well worth it because Hokkaido is known for having its own style of ramen, and it might just be the tastiest ramen I've ever had in my life.
So what would you rate our experience?
Oh, delicious. Just delicious. 10 out of 10.
After filling up our tummies, we finally checked into the hotel and pretty much died. The next day we had a full itinerary exploring Sapporo, but our first priority was of course the Pokemon Center. And honestly, it wasn't my favorite. Not like the center itself had anything wrong with it. In fact, it even featured one of my favorite Pokemon as its mascot. But on the day we went, it was absolutely packed to the brim with a line that stretched far outside the store. I can't remember if there was even anything unique, but even if there was, it would not have been worth waiting in that line. I did at least get the commemorative coin though, which at the end of the day is the most important thing anyway.
Oh,
Oh wait, mine's upside down.
that's pretty cute.
Even though the center was a bust, exploring Sapporo more than made up for it. Especially when it started snowing as we made our way to the top of Mount Moiwa, where I got to witness my second favorite view in all of Japan. It was pretty dang cold, but that honestly just added to the charm of visiting Japan's most northern prefecture. But my favorite part of visiting this city was conveniently right across from the hotel we were staying at. Had we not been staying at that hotel, I'm not sure I would have ever discovered this massive multi-floor mall that contained almost exclusively anime figurines and video games. Needless to say, I went absolutely berserk at these stores, even making some questionable purchases, which I feel more than made up for my lack of not buying anything at the Pokemon Center.
Is that a freaking Pokedex? What does it do?
After all that traveling, we could really use some time to rest. But with just one more week in Japan and 2 Pokemon Centers still left to visit, the anxiety was starting to creep in that we might not be able to finish this challenge on time. So for this final trial of our quest, we decided to use our handy dandy HMO2. 1, because it was actually cheaper than a bullet train, and 2, because these were some of the farthest Pokemon Centers from Tokyo, and we had no time to waste. Compared to our flight coming into Japan, there was no English on this domestic airline, so I was a bit scared whenever the pilot made an announcement because I wasn't sure if he was just giving a weather update or we were about to come crashing down. But thankfully we made it just fine to the capital of Kyushu Island, Fukuoka. At this point we had visited the Kanto, Johto, and Sinnoh region's real-life counterparts, but at last we'd get to visit my favorite, Hoenn. Sadly, we didn't have that much time to explore, and similar to Hokkaido, I've heard it's better to rent a car if you want to see more of this area outside just the big city. But during our short time in Fukuoka, we decided to check out the Canal City Mall, where another legendary Nintendo character has a cafe.
There's so much cute stuff in here. I want to order everything, but we're not doing that.
I didn't feel nearly as bad munching into Kirby as I did Eevee. I mean, just look at this little dude. He's practically begging to be eaten. Anyway, on to the Pokemon Center, and once again, it was insanely packed. I don't know if it was a holiday on this weekend, but there was at least a 40-minute line to get in, and I debated just skipping it like back in Sapporo.
With it being this packed, I don't think I'm even gonna bother going in, but we have to get the little coin. And the problem is, the coin is inside. I see it. I see the machine.
2 hours later.
Oh, I've never been so excited for one of these. It made me work for this one, but we got it.
Again, not the Pokemon Center's fault, but because it was so crowded, this was not the most enjoyable shopping experience, but I did notice one interesting product.
Why do they got Mewtwo shooting discs out of his...
Also, the statue here wasn't the most interesting, so happy to have at least gotten the coin, we head back to our hotel and began preparing for the final chapter of our adventure. Separated by almost 400 miles of ocean from the rest of Japan is the subtropical island of Okinawa. There is a ferry you can take here, but it literally takes an entire day and we had no time to waste. So once again, we decided to fly.
So we dropped off our luggage. I got rid of my jacket too because it's actually pretty hot here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hot, but it's warm.
I was actually starting to sweat, so I guess for me it was hot.
Okinawa's airport is on the island's biggest city of Naha, but the Pokemon Center was about an hour away by bus. Thankfully, we arrived pretty early, so before heading out, we decided to explore Naha's famous Kokusaidori Street. This area reminded me a lot of the more touristy parts of Puerto Rico, combined with a little bit of Miami and maybe some Hollywood sprinkled in there. But I was most surprised to find this 7-Eleven with Pokemon plastered all over it. So of course, I had to find out what this was all about.
Oh, this is cute. Look at the little footsteps. Oh, I see.
I mean, there's something, but it's not
Yeah,
anything.
it's a photo shoot spot.
Yeah.
And after feeling my Todd Snap fantasy, we had worked up an appetite and decided to get an Okinawa special. Spam?
So I guess Okinawa likes spam? We got this spam onigiri basically. Well, it's open onigiri.
It's called musubi.
I didn't know that. But it's freaking delicious.
Remember when it said buses to the Pokemon Center supposedly come every 9 minutes? That was a complete lie, because we waited over an hour not knowing if this thing would even show up at all. But just when we were about to give up hope, our savior arrived and took us all the way to the Aeon Mall.
After almost an hour and a half, we made it to the Aeon Mall in Okinawa, which is where the Okinawa Pokemon Center is. So it's pretty far from the airport, but we're finally almost done. Oh my god.
We only had 1 hour until the bus back to our hotel arrived, so my wife went to get some food and I of course went to find the Pokemon Center. But this mall was absolutely massive, so that was a lot easier said than done.
Alright, well I think it's safe to say I found the Pokemon Center. Oh my god, what is going on there? Why, what is going on? Goodbye, Pikachu.
Now that I've seen them all, I can genuinely say this is the most original and unique Pokemon Center of them all, with so much Okinawa-specific merchandise and decorations all over the store. And they also have the best entrance of any center, with the Pokemon logo being fully animated and the Arcanine statue having this fuzzy texture on it that made it look almost alive. This is actually the newest Pokemon Center to be built in Japan, so the fact it felt the most modern and clean makes a lot of sense.
We did it, guys. Every single Pokemon Center in Japan. This has been the craziest journey I've ever embarked on in my life, probably. Coming to a different country and going all across it for Pokemon, for freaking Executor, bro.
Having finally completed our 3-month-long odyssey across Japan, part of me just wanted to stay at this Pokemon Center forever. But of course, there was just one more thing left to do.
There's a board here that says touch a fit you find interesting. I mean, I've been looking for Trico literally at every single Pokemon Center. I've never seen a Trico sitting plushie. That's the one right there. Check it out at Pokemon Center. Oh, I'm never gonna get my Trico.
Actually, I meant the commemorative coin, but turns out this store didn't have that either. So after coming all this way, we couldn't even complete our collection. I guess this Arcanine plush will have to make up for it. But the journey wasn't quite over yet, because we were almost 1,000 miles away from Tokyo, so we hopped on another long bus ride, saw a whale shark in real life, and a surprise Pikachu at the aquarium, then came all the way back to Naha where we stumbled upon a Pokemon-themed train? Seriously, does Okinawa just get all the coolest Pokemon stuff? And finally, we flew back to Tokyo.
And so ends our Okinawa adventure.
That was long.
Yeah.
When I first came up with the idea for this video, I wanted to challenge myself to do something I hadn't seen many others attempt. But in the end, going to every Pokemon Center was just the motivator to get out there and see more of this amazing world. Throughout this adventure, we ended up taking trains, planes, boats, and buses all across Japan, getting to see so many famous sights along the way, and let's not forget all the delicious food I ate. In other words, this trip was never just about the destination, it was about the journey. So would I recommend anyone else to try and visit every single Pokemon Center? Absolutely. As long as the stores themselves aren't your only goal, because there's so much more to see in every city we visited. And this was an experience I'll truly never forget. I'm struggling to find the words to end this video, like I just don't want it to end, to be honest. But there's not really much else to say, so thank you guys so much for watching and joining me on this adventure. And who knows, next time we might just visit every Pokemon Center in the world. Oh, and in the end, I got my Trico.